Hello everyone, it's Yogi here. And first of all, just give me a confirmation that you can see me and hear me. Last time we had a little issue there, and I was streaming into the completely wrong location. Okay, give me a little wave here. And yes, finally, this is we finally get to do this demonstration because a couple of weeks ago I had a go, and as I said, technical issue. All right, so today hopefully we're all good, and I get to show you. Oh, great! Claudia says we can see you. Wonderful, wonderful. Yes, amazing, amazing. There's a yogi move emoji right there. I love it. And so, so we're having this demo today, and afterwards we're going to take a little break after the demo, and we're going to have our regular Amy Stewart style, okay? And I can't wait for that. So today is going to be just yummy, yummy stitching festival here. And so this method, it's called Gemma's method. It's because it's been pioneered and invented by no other than Gemma Stitches. Okay, so the lady's name is Gemma, and this is her channel. So all credits go to her. Okay, this is not my method, and I do not, create any kind of variation. I'm following her instructions, and the purpose of today's demo is to really share my perspective, because I'm coming in not knowing the method at all and learning bit by bit from her, okay, watching her stitch. And I'd like to share that insight and give you a sort of high level certain rules. This method is very nuanced, and that's why I think a lot of stitchers, maybe they try it and just feel like it doesn't flow, and maybe there are other reasons. But if there's confusion within how the method works, hopefully I can help you today. So I see you guys there in the chat, okay, but I'll say hello to you one by one when we get to the saw, okay? And so for the demonstration purposes, I'm gonna just dive straight in and start to show you how this method works. And then when we get to relax in our saw, and I'll greet you one by one later on. But I can see you in the chat there. So welcome everyone. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. You've chosen the right place, right time to be here with us. And this is, I think, it's the best stitching group, because we're here together every day, pretty much, and live stitching together in chat. Okay, so Gemma's method, as I said, is pioneered by Gemma, and the reason would be, I think this might have been the second parking method I learned. So the first one was the block by block diagonal, as well as I demonstrated in the previous live demo here. And I find the two methods actually are complementary for each other. I very often switch from back and forth quite a lot to kind of to change things up a little bit. So bear in mind, these two methods can be blended, switch back and forth, and it's great fun. Okay, so this is essentially a diagonal parking method, and even though it's not as clear-cut as block by block there, and let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm using this project, which is the actual project. This is one of my whips, 14 count stitching project. I'm using this particular method for this piece, so I think it's perfect. And let me show you where I am with this one. Okay, let me show you the app view here. So this is where I am. This is the piece. Some of you might be familiar with it. This is called Grandma's crop rim or crop shed, whatever it is. This is a piece of artwork by Steve Crisp, and not Steve Crisp. Yes, Steve Crisp or John Oh no, John Reed. Oh, all these names, I get confused. And it's really beautiful. And I am currently stitching this piece using Gemma's Stitches method. And as you can see, the formation of the stitches, probably a telltale sign. You can always tell if someone is doing some form of Gemma's method just by looking at their work. So this is where I am. So for demonstration purposes today, I am going to move to the left here. Okay, this corner. So this is what you're looking at on my fabric here. And I'm going to just bring up a highlight here using Saga just to frame the position I'm in right now. So it should give you some indication of where I am. So what I'm trying to do is essentially treat this upper left corner as a new start. So it doesn't matter where you are on the fabric. It could be on the beginning upper left of a page, or whatever corner you decided to embark on this way of stitching. So I'm going to treat the upper left corner here as the beginning of your project. Okay, so it's the method doesn't change. I just want to orient you on my fabric so you know what you're looking at. So from here, so this is literally here, and so the reason I think, from talking to you guys on the stream, etc., the kind of general impression I get when people are frustrated with this project, with this method, is first of all maybe the speed of it. Okay, because it's more thorough. You can't just go cross country. That's not what we're doing here, and just stitch wherever you want. You do have to be methodical to a certain extent, but there are good reasons for it, and I'll explain as we move forward. But even though this method is slightly nuanced, and that's when people, if you have block by block, it's very clear cut. There are about 3 rules I can give you with block by block stitching that you probably instantly know how it works. But with Gemma's method, it's not so clear cut. But having said that, there are ground rules, okay? And I'm going to share those with you. And hopefully it's going to help you to find clarification wherever you're about to stitch, wherever you are on the fabric. So here we go. I'm going to show you my PowerPoint slide here, okay? So let me just roll back to the top here. So this block, this blue square is essentially is a stitch, okay? So visualize that. And this stitch could be anywhere on your fabric right now. So if you look at this space and go, well, I'm about to stitch it. Before you do that, there are a couple of things you need to do. And these are the fundamental ground rules. It will probably help you to avoid a lot of confusion here. So if you look at a stitch on your fabric and go, well, can I make this stitch? Am I breaking any rules? 2 things to do. One is you look up. Okay, you look up, you look above this current stitch you're about to do, and wondering if it's the correct location to stitch. You look above and see if there's a stitch there. Okay, so you look up, and obviously, if you're starting from the upper left in the beginning of this, the project, there will not be stitches above or the left, but wherever you are, this is basically two things you need. Well, the ground rules you need to remember. You look up to see if there's a stitch already made, completed, and then you look to the left. Check these two directions, above and the left. If B and C, above and left, have stitches completed, yes, you can stitch here. Can you see what's happening here? So stitch A wouldn't come into question. Stitch A has to exist. Okay, so that's by default. But B and C, you need to look up and the left and check if both locations have stitches completed. Yes, you can stitch here. Okay, and scroll down. If B or C, neither Well, definitely, if one of them is missing, you do not stitch on the blue square, meaning that you have to go and complete B or C first before you're allowed to make create a stitch in the blue square space there. I hope that's clear. So two things, wherever you are, if you get confused, wherever you are on your on your fabric, just look above. Make sure there's one stitch is completed, and you look to the left and there's a completed stitch. If there's B or C is not there, then you do those first before you move forward. Okay, so these are ground rule. And you might be wondering, well, that sounds a little bit abstract, and I'll show you as we start stitching, it will become clear. Okay, so you might go, well, how does it manifest on the fabric itself? Just a quick sort of high level sort of explanation here. So you're looking at 10 by 10 square here. Okay, so number one, so we are starting from stitch 1. That's what we're going to start when I start stitching. Okay, so number 1 is the first stitch I am going to make. And then once stitch number 1 is done, we open up number 1 and number 2 as options. So we're moving essentially, so if you're doing from different corners, okay, you are allowed to do start from upper right, bottom left, bottom right, whichever. You just need to flip the direction. But I'm demonstrating based on if you go from upper left and downwards. So by stitching number 1, the blue square, I essentially open up the option to stitch number 1 and number 2, not number 3. You do not just jump to diagonal bottom right unless number 1 and number 2 have been completed. So this is again just to remind everyone that we are doing diagonal stitching, but it's not strictly diagonal. It doesn't have to be a perfect line. So if from here, once the number 1 or number 2, whichever you decide to do, let's say you move forward, you stitch number 1 from the previous slide. Okay, you've complete that. You open up the stitch on the right for you. And then you can continue moving to the right, actually, in theory. This happens when if the 3 blue squares, 3 blue stitches are the same color. So it's allowed, even though it's not strictly diagonal, you're allowed to do something like that. And don't worry if it doesn't make sense right now. When we start stitching, it will make sense, okay, hopefully. And then you can keep moving, but obviously you want to keep the diagonal line in mind. So at this point, unless I can keep going forward with the same color, I want to move down, come back to 2 and make that stitch. And then once I'm done with the second stitch from the top, I open up position 2 and 3, so on and so forth. I hope you see the kind of the pattern there. Okay, so this is as far as I'm going to go in terms of the slides, and just one more slide here. So as I said, ultimately, we are trying to bring the stitches to follow the diagonal line here. And it's not a strict diagonal. It can have quite loose shape, odd shape sometimes. Some bits might stick out a little bit, but ultimately we're constantly trying to come back and smooth out this line and to bring it a little bit more diagonal as we move forward. Okay, so hopefully making sense so far. And I'll stop at some point and look at the chat. Okay, so while we're stitching, at least at this point, I am going to focus on just talk you through, and then you know, if you have questions, we will have time for that. All right, so hopefully by then you know, I have addressed most of the things they've been wondering in your mind. So let me just move it down here. So we're starting from here. You can see there's some the stitches I had to undo because, you know, 2 weeks ago I was streaming by myself, talking to myself. And so I had to undo those stitches. And let's start again, shall we? So I had a dry run. So that's good. I had a practice. So imagine this is the beginning of your work, and it doesn't matter where it is. From the point you're going to start from this method, that's the stitch 1 that we just saw, okay? And let me bring on this slide here and wind back to stitch 1 to show you. Okay, so this is where we are. If you look at the PowerPoint, the slides there. So this is where we are. This is stitch 1. That's where we are. Okay, so let me take pickless thread here. So this is the actual project. So I'm stitching my own web. Okay, this one is 720. 720. It would be so funny if we get a spooky bingo at this point. So if shout spooky bingo if you're stitching 720. Okay, so I'm gonna take 720. And the beauty of the live demonstration is there's no editing. So you're literally seeing me working on this piece from, upper left corner here. And these are the steps I go through. Okay, this is a real project. And so this is my 720 here. And let me move it to the left slightly so you can see. So even though I'm starting from this point, I'm just following the page border there. So ignore the stitches from above. This method, you can start from any point. You don't need to follow the blocks because it's not using blocks as, as the guide. Okay, so from here, I'm going to make my stitch 1 here. As you can refer to my slide there. This is my stitch 1 from the upper left. So at this point, I have no stitches above, or technically no stitch to the left, right? This is a new project, new beginning, and I'm just making my first stitch. All right, already it's looking a little bit wonky here. I missed a little bit there, doesn't matter. So I'm going to complete this stitch. And if you look at my pattern here as well, there's only one stitch of this color. The next stitch of this color is a couple of stitches away. So at this point, you do not move forward and start stitching the next stitch, which is, so I've completed this stitch, okay, if you look at my ab. The next stitch is over here on the second one. But I do not stitch that because it's not attached to where I am. So with Gemma Stitch method, we do not create boxed in stitches. And that's the beauty of it, because if you don't like ninja stitches, the loose stitches, you have to go back and fill in. This is a perfect method, okay? So what I do, so if the next stitch of the same color is away, it's not attached to your current stitch, it's not on the right, it's not at the bottom, then you go and park. That's it. That's it. So I'm going to park on this stitch, which is a 2 from the left here. In theory, I can also park on a stitch that's diagonally left, the third from the third row. It's a choice you make. So if you think about what we're ultimately trying to do is to follow the diagonal line there. So let me actually draw the diagonal line on my fabric so you get some idea here. So what we're looking at is this, right? That's what we're trying to do. So instead of looking at whether this stitch is furthest from the top or left, you actually measure it diagonally. So this is what you are looking for. So I can park either here, this stitch, which is where I'm parking, or the diagonal left here. Both make sense because they share the same distance to this diagonal line there. You see what I'm saying? So this is probably where people start to get a little bit lightheaded and start to go, what am I doing here? Okay, and I was there, so I totally understand it. But if you physically draw a line, on your fabric or on your chart, which I could as well, but not at this point. Probably gets a little bit cluttered. But if you look at my fabric, it makes sense. I can park here, or I can park the one that's diagonally to the left, because they're both only one stitch away from the diagonal line. Okay, and it's not black and white. It's not a black and white stitching method. So from here, I am going to mark this stitch as my part thread there, so you can see it happening on my chart there. So once I make number one, stitch one there, if you look at my slide, I open up 1 and 2, which is the one on the right and the bottom, as my option to stitch. Okay, I do not stitch here a diagonal downwards, because if I look up, there's no stitch there. If I look left, there's no stitch there. So I do not stitch them. I can pick number 1 or number 2 there. Okay, so I'm going to move to the right, or in this case, just so happen, I've got a cluster of stitches that's surrounding this area. So, you know, as a Gemma stitcher, it's like jackpot, because you can do multiple stitches at the same time. So for me, it's a hurrah moment. Okay, so if you look at my chart there, literally with the star symbol stitch, which is 332A, I can just go around and fill in this area. That's really nice. So that's what I'm going to do. 3328, 3328. And I've got a strand here that's already threaded. Okay, so in this case, there are 2 stitches here, and you can fill in this area whatever order you want, but you want to think about where you're going to park next. If you look at the chart, okay, let me bring it up a little bit. So if you look at the chart, it's got the same colors, the star symbol, filling in this upper left corner there. But the next corner I am going to park is, let me just highlight here. I'm aiming to park to the top row there. Can you see that? This is where I'm aiming to park. Okay, so let me come back to my fabric here. So if I'm going to park it up there, which essentially on the top row, I want to think about how I'm going to fill in the space there. You can do it in order to the bottom and then bring the thread up. Okay, but you know, I'm particular about where I take my thread. So let me show you what I'm going to do. So intuitively, when you have multiple rows of the same color, we tend to go top row first and second row next. You know, you complete row by row, it's more orderly, and you could do that indeed. Or you could follow the diagonal direction, okay? Instead of going to the right, which is, I have 2 more stitches to the right, I could do that. Or very often, I would actually come down. So I'm training my brain to think diagonal. So my instinct will go, well, there are 3 stitches on top, I'll just do those, you know, and let me just bring it over here. The 2 stitches rather, 2 stitches on top, I'll do the 2 first, and then 3 at the bottom, and then 2, and then 1 to complete this diagonal area. You could do that, or very often I just like to follow the diagonal line. I go down, and I stitch the one below, okay? I'll mark as I go, so you know what's happening. I do that one, and do the second one, and then I'm going down. And this time, I am going to do both bottom 2 stitches at the bottom there, because I am not coming back again. So I am basically treating the diagonal row as if I would do with my top to bottom rows, if that makes sense. And so I am going to stitch these ones here, 2 stitches from top, bottom. All right. That one over there makes sense. So I'm filling in these stitches, they're attached together. Okay, I've done this far. And then I'm going to take it up. I think this thread, I'm actually parked at the wrong stitch. It should be one below. Sorry, that was my fault. This one on my fabric, it should be the third one from the top. I actually parked on the second. So let me just correct that. Okay, so this one, oh, it doesn't like my needle here. I just want to correct this part area here. It was me. So it should go down 1 stitch. Okay, otherwise it gets in the way. It should be here. 2 stitches from top. It should be parked here. Right, so that's correct. And then I'm going to come back to complete the 2 stitches over here. So you can do in any order. If you can start from the bottom, it doesn't matter because they're the same colors. All I'm trying to do is to complete them. Okay. Can you see what's happening? So 2 stitches there. And so it takes me to the top row. So you don't have to do it the same order as I am, but I like the neatness of thinking about where I'm going to park, which is here. So whatever order I'm stitching these ones, I want to take it back to the closest location to my next parking destination. So from here, I am going to thread through and park it. Okay, so that's my second color. So I do not keep stitching because there's 1 gap in between. So I park. So all stitches that you make should be attached with each other in, diagonally. So, you know, if you look at someone's web, you can pretty much tell if they're following this method because it's very unique formation. There's no loose stitches and everything's loosely diagonal. Okay, and I'm going to keep going. Hopefully, after a couple of other colors, it will start to make sense. So from here, I am opening up these stitches around the edges. So as you increase the diagonal line, there will be more and more choices you can make. And that's one of the great things about this method. If you work on a piece that you're kind of stuck with 1 color palette, a lot of times you can probably find another location along that diagonal line and pick a different color to reset. If you're like me, I get fatigued with the same colors very quickly. This is a great way of stitching. Okay, and we can talk about how far you want to stretch that diagonal line a little bit there. So let me keep going with the next color. So if you look at this formation of stitches, you go, where do you go next? So if we're thinking diagonal line, the obvious choice will be this one, wouldn't it? Because then I'm continuing that diagonal shape as much as I can. Again, we're not looking for a neat straight line. We're talking about a loose definition of diagonal shape. So the next obvious candidate will be this stitch here. So let me pick the color there. Okay. So next color is 3853. 3853. All right, I've got one threaded as well. So this one, if you look at this kind of distribution on the chart here, pretty much, even though there are quite a few stitches along the top row, if you're doing cross country, you probably just go ahead and fill in the top row there, right? But with Gemma's method, you don't. Basically, this is where the discipline comes in with Gemma Stitches. A lot of stitchers probably struggle with this because particularly if you used to do some sort of color completion, even just within one block, your instinct is trying to see that, oh, there are quite a few on top row. I'm going to just start filling in. You don't, okay? So I am going to make this stitch right here. So this is where it becomes a little bit more nuanced. Even though I choose to stitch on this top right to continue with that more completed diagonal line, you don't have to. And this is the beauty of it. You could have come to the bottom left, because the bottom left is clearly okay to stitch, and also this second one as well. And the reason I'm saying so is both of the stitches adhere to that ground rule that we talked about in the beginning. If you look up, there's a stitch. If you look left, there's a stitch. So is here and so is there. Okay. So you could technically pick any one of these 3 stitches, but not the top one, not from the second row, because second row there isn't a stitch on top. You see what I'm saying? So it's a choice, the judgment call that you make as you stitch in your fabric, and it makes it fun because there are decisions you need to make. Judgment call is like a puzzle you're constantly trying to solve. So let me make that stitch. Okay, let's follow the diagonal line as much as I can. So you can probably guess where I'm going to part next, right? If you look at my app here, the only logical location would be 2 stitches away over here, because that's the closest stitch to the one I just made. Okay, and this is where I'm going to part. So this will be my 3rd part threads right here, and I've completed this one on the left here. All right, makes sense? And from here, so looking at this diagonal line, I've got quite a few choices. I can go from top to bottom and pick the colors here, or from bottom to top. It's up to you. I like to go from top to bottom, and then, if it makes sense, I spend a little bit more time at the bottom, smooth it out, and then go from top right again. It's just more orderly. But it's up to you. You can make judgment call on where you're going to stitch. And lo and behold, I'm actually coming to my first part thread. I think is one of the first or the second. So I've got a part thread here, so it makes sense. It's from the upper right corner, and also I already have a part thread waiting for me, so this would be my first choice here. Okay, so if there's a part thread, sometimes I choose to work on it first, but not necessarily. It's up to you. I can come and work on this one first as well. It doesn't matter. But as I have a part thread already on the upper right corner, the top row, this is where I'm going to do. So I'm going to thread my part thread here. So in terms of the number of the part threads, in terms of volume, depends on the method. This method, I would say, is quite moderate. You shouldn't have tons and tons of threads everywhere, because they're all flowing away from that diagonal line. And occasionally you might have multiple threads of the same color. It does happen. As you could increase this diagonal line, there might be occasions, if you think about each thread here as a seed that you plant, and they're waiting for you when you get there, right? So there might be color flows, the same color, but flow through the different locations to a different direction. So times like that, you plant another seed, another thread there waiting for you. So I'm going to complete this stitch here. All right, so in this case, if you look at my chart there are 2. There's one stitch here and there's another stitch to the right. So I can technically stitch both of them, and I will, because these are the 2 stitches, they're connected to each other. Okay, so so this bit is sticking out now, and it's okay with Gemma's method. We're not looking for, a precise diagonal shape there. Okay, so I can do it like that. These 2 stitches are done. So the question will be, where do I part next? So I'm going to look to the chat, okay? So I've completed these 2 stitches. Where would you part next? Okay, there's a little bit of time lag, so I'm going to wait for a little bit and maybe look at the chat here. Yeah, Miriam says Gemma's new way of stitching is called color flow parking method. I was looking at the tutorial again. Yes, so this is the original Gemma's method. This is actually my preference. I'm still trying to practice color flow, which is the new method, but I think it's probably very much based on the pattern. If the patterns calls for color flow, it probably make more sense. But my brain is pretty much wired for the original method. But I love to explore more. So let me just come back to this slide here. So currently, or maybe it's easier. Let me come back here then. Second row, Frida says second row. So second row is the one stitch below here, right? So that's Frida's answer. And Vaduhi says second row, first start symbol. And Turtle says part in 5, second row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, everybody, all of you, you're correct. Okay, so we're talking about, because you know it's correct, because this stitch, so there are 3 locations there where this stitch appears. One is here, the other one is below, it's over here, right? If you look at the chat, my app there. And the third one is 2 stitches away. Right, so you want to measure the distance and find the closest stitch to start with. So the one below will be most obvious, because first of all, it's attached below, and also it's closest to that diagonal line we're trying to create there. So yes, so this is where you park. Makes sense. Very good. Yeah, Badui has been practicing this method for quite a while as well. So so here, so this is where I'm going to park. So I wouldn't park diagonally this stitch because it's slightly further away from these stitches. So I'm parking right below. And once I'm part that stitch, okay, the question will be, so you can tell that there's a constant decision making as you moving forward. So it's not a, let me just fill in all the colors within this block and then another color, third color, which is fun too, block by block. But this is, the decisions, judgment calls you have to make as you move forward. It makes it fun. I know for some of you, you might go, well, what a drag. You have to, make decisions constantly. And maybe that's the case. Maybe, therefore, it's not for you. I get it. But trust me, it's fun. You can always, it's like trying to solve a puzzle. And the goal of the puzzle is to keep the stitches together, no boxed in stitches, and also constantly smooth out that line. So now this bit is sticking out, okay? And now I'm starting to think, well, I want to smooth out this line to complete the diagonal line. So if you were me, if this was your stitch, this was your work, where would you go next? Okay, where would you go next? And let me show you my chart here. in order to maintain that diagonal line. So I have a few choices, and they're not illegal to make, but where would you go next? But he says, and still can get it right. Still can't get it right, I'm guessing. With my project, I understand everything, but when it comes to stitching, my brain freezes. But it will become second nature, because once you realize what the method is trying to achieve, it's just a matter of scanning the shapes, positions of the stitches, and it makes sense. Okay, Turtle says force minus 2. That one, right? Okay. And anyone else? Vadui says, I will start a new thread with second stitch. Where would that be then? With 2 stitches. Oh, second. Vadui says, I'm trying to understand, I will start a new thread with 2 stitches. Are you talking about this stitch as well? The one that's Heather suggested. And Serena says box with a diagonal stripe. Box with diagonal. Oh, I see. So Serena says this one, right? With the part thread. Is that correct? So Serena suggests this one. Heather says that one. Okay. Anyways, row 3 next to the part thread. Chelsea says row 3, 1, 2, 3. Row 3. Row 3 next to the part star. Oh, this one. So row 2. Do you mean row 2? So that's what Heather suggested as well. And Vadui says second row. Okay, the beginning of the second row. Okay, yeah. I would say technically you could do either, because in terms of the ground rule, let's review. So I think one of you chose this one with part thread, if I'm correct. You could, because if you look up, there's a stitch. Look left, there's a stitch. And I could stitch this one. Technically is correct, no problem. So it's a choice you make. But personally, most of you probably in the same camp as me, I'll start from this one. Because generally, if possible, if it makes sense, I want to flow from upper right to the left. It just, I think it just works better for a human brain, at least my brain. You can go from bottom up. So from the middle is one choice. If this thread is calling for you, you can go for it, because it's okay to stitch. It's attached. Stitch on the left, stitch above. Perfect. But personally, you're quite right. Instead of picking up any of, or even this one, you can keep going, This one, technically, you could as well. But with the diagonal line in mind, okay, this is the beauty of this way of stitching. There's so many choices you can make, and you're not breaking it. But at the same time, you have this line that in mind that you want to achieve constantly. And this is driving force of this method for me. It's great fun, okay? So yes, you're quite right. I am going to pick, whoops, not marking it. All right. I am going to pick this symbol, right? So this is what you guys will be doing as well. And I think I forgot to mark these 2 stitches. Let me mark them so it's correct. Okay, so this is the next symbol, and this is what I would personally choose as well. So I'm introducing another thread here. Okay, so 402 is my next choice. So you can see the pattern emerging, and it's not random. It might feel like, it's so nuanced, you can't apply rules to. But there are rules. They're not just black and white rules. 402, 402, and I've got one here as well. Let me pick a new one actually. Let me pick a new thread here. It's better. And from top to bottom is more neat, and also I'm continuing to create and smooth out that diagonal line there. So second row, upper left, that's my next stitch. And I probably don't need to ask you where you will park next. Okay, so this one will be quite obvious where you want to park. But chat if you want to tell me where you are going to park next, so we know that we're on the same page. Okay, so I'm completing this stitch here. And it looks a little bit wonky. Let me have a look. Let me smooth that out. Okay. So this stitch is completed, and you probably guessed it, I'm going to park one stitch away. It makes perfect sense. I wouldn't park this one over there on the top row because it's further away from me. Okay, so I want to find the nearest stitch and also following the diagonal direction. So that's kind of my next to the park start. Yes, exactly, Chelsea. So this is where I am. You got it. Yes. So from here, where would you go next? I know where I'm going to go next. So this stitch is a little bit ugly. I'll come back to fix it. But I probably, let me just pull that thread, make it tidy. And in terms of thread management here, it's up to you. Most of the time I just pull, I've got a habit of smoothing out my threads diagonally. That's how I want to do it. But and also these are active threads. I need to have access to them within the session. So I wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't put it, wrap it around the bobbin. But very often stitches that park a lot will have a needle minder here, and then just wrap the thread around the needle minder. Makes sense. And so this is quite temporary, and it's very easy to access the threads like this. So very often that's what I do. Just get it out of the way there. Yes, so everybody got it correctly. And Calvin says, it looks fun. Yes, it's really fun to do. It's really fun to do because constantly you have to kind of think your way through, and also you feel like you have cheated the system if you get it correctly. You just feel like, yes, I did it, and it's good fun. Chelsea says park thread row 3. Okay, yes, Chelsea, you're correct. Chelsea's getting it. Chelsea's getting it. Yes. So if I'm looking at this diagonal line, and so this one is right in the middle of the block, but this diagonal line is constant moving down. So, even though we might mark it like this on the chart or on the fabric, but this diagonal line is constantly moving down like this. It might be invisible, but it's in your mind as a stitcher. So you're constantly aligning your stitches following that diagonal line. Okay, so yes, Chelsea is correct. The next one will be the very obvious candidate. I'm following the diagonal line, and there's a park thread as well. So perfect. So let me mark this one, okay, and mark this one over there. So everybody got it correctly. And the next one, yes, it's very obvious candidate here. This one down at the third row from this area. And okay, so this is an interesting one. So so I think at this point it's probably quite obvious to you. If we're following the diagonal line, then do I have one stitch or two stitches I'm allowed to make? You can just quickly type in the number. Am I making 1 stitch here or 2 stitches before I need to park? So I'm making this one first. All right. Chelsea says 2, Vadu, he says 2. Absolutely. Because if I look diagonally toward the bottom left here, there's another stitch waiting for me. Yes, Laura is correct. 2. Right here. Perfect. It's perfect. Everybody's getting it. It's making sense. Okay. So you can tell why it's like a game. Okay. So next would be, guys, where do I park next? Look at my app here. So I've made these 2 stitches here. Okay. And everybody got it. Where would you park them? This one is interesting. This one is interesting. So I've got either row 1, 2, 3, 4. Either row 4 diagonally to the bottom there. Either here, or I've got one above there. So number 1, number 2. Which one would you park? So both of them are lining with the diagonal line, right? And both 1 stitch away. So one is over here, right? Another one is down here. 4th row. Frida says 4th row. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. Frida says here. And 1, 2, 3. And Turtle Stitches says 5 minus 3. Row 5. So this is considered as top row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Vadui says 2. Oh, okay, option 2. Vadui says here. And so, okay, this is number 1. Okay, that's probably easier. Number 1 or number 2? Which one? Okay, Vadui says 2 on the part star thread. Okay, so number 1. Number 1 for Chelsea. Rainier says 4th row. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. This one at the bottom here. Number 2, right? 5 over 3 down. Okay, Chelsea says this one. So there are different choices. No, 1 stitch away. All right. Upper right corner. Okay, so the correct answer is you're correct. You're correct. So it really depends on which direction you're going, because both of these stitches are share the same distance from the diagonal line we're trying to achieve. So you can go from bottom up or up to bottom. It's up to you. It probably depending on when are you planning to stitch the right, this one down here, okay? Because there are 2 stitches on the bottom right there. So I think personally, I would go for number 2 here. And the reason being, there are 2 stitches above that I cannot stitch at the same time. If you look at, that's 1 stitch away. There are 2 over here, right? Can you see that? There's 1, there's 2. Oh, sorry, up there. 1 and 2. And in order to do these 2 on the top, I need to do the stitches above. So in terms of order, it might be easier for me to park over here below. 1, 2, that one. Am I correct? 1, 2, 3. I'm just looking at the chart, making sure that it's correct. So I would park here. So personally, I will park here because you have to think about which stitch are you going to reach first. But it probably doesn't matter in this case. You can park either locations and, both are correct. Both are correct. And this is where I think most people, their brains start to scramble and go, well, what should I do next? A lot of times you have multiple answers. They're all correct. So it depends on where you go. It might, have some impact on where you stitch first, but they're both correct. All right. So bear in mind, so this probably, make you a little bit more relaxed because you know that this is not black and white answer. And the only ground rules you need to make sure that is what we talked about in the beginning. You look up, is there a stitch? You look left, is there a stitch? If there isn't, these two locations not filled in, you don't stitch. Otherwise, technically, you could stitch wherever you want. And also, there's nothing wrong with maybe park in the location that's not optimal because you will figure out that there are better locations to park. In the beginning, when I first learning this method, I was watching Gemma's, videos like almost like a chess player watching someone else play. I was trying to predict where she would go next and where she will park. And eventually you start to get to know how her brain works and why she does a certain way. And I think most, those of you in the chat, I think you've got it. It just sometimes we make different choices based on preferences and that's it. Okay. So next one will be, I have a few options. If I'm really strict more strict on the diagonal shape, I might come down here. You see, there are 2 stitches. There's 2 stitches here. I can do both. So that is probably my choice because I can do multiple stitches down here. They're both the same symbol and both of them have stitches above. I can do them. So that might be my next choice. But some of you might decide to go up again and start to, build up stitches here. So it's nuanced. There's no wrong answer unless you're creating gaps between stitches or boxed in stitches. Okay, so personally, I'm gonna go down here and make these 2. It sounds good to me. All right, and this one is easy peasy. A14. A14. Where it's a burgundy. Let me pick this thread here. I hope you start to make sense because this is not a method that you can just do this. Then it's done. And I think that's probably the sticking point with a lot of stitchers. But if you're, look at it more like a strategy rather than rules, I think it will become a lot easier because strategy is flexible and is nuanced. Whereas rules are just rules. You follow the rules, you get the same result. But, you can have 10 stitches stitching the same area, the same pattern. They might make different choices. Okay, so here we are. So I am going to do the bottom 2 because I can do more than one. That's a bonus. This is a bonus. And in terms of parking location, it's probably quite obvious, right? If you look at the chart here. But you let me know. Where do you think the next logical parking location would be? as I'm doing these 2 stitches. Okay. Turtle stitches says row 1 minus 5 is also an option. Absolutely. You can go up and stop building up. You don't need to fill up the bottom necessarily. I choose to do so because there are 2 stitches waiting for me, which is nice, and both of them are okay to stitch because both of them have stitches above, and as I'm stitching, there's also a completed stitch to the left as well. Okay, so with this one, it's actually very easy. So the next stitch is the bottom row left from the third stitch is from the left, and this is the closest stitch I have. And you can also part down here if you want to, the third stitch from the block below. That's an option as well if you choose to do so, but I tend to go think about which of the 2 am I going to get to first. So that helps me to make decision. But either way, it probably doesn't matter. So you shouldn't be afraid of making certain choices. And the worst situation, just switch. You just take the thread and part to the next location. It's no big deal, right? So I'm going to complete these 2, mark these 2, and mark that one. So that's where I am on the chart. Okay. And let me just move forward. I might do a few more stitches, and I'll come to the chat and just make sure that I have kind of covered the kind of scenarios that can happen. So, just talk a little bit about the color flow method. So Gemma's method, color flow, essentially, it is following the same principle. The only difference is instead of following the diagonal line, she allows the stitches flow. If there's a cluster of colors, she will allow herself to stitch those areas. So it breaks the diagonal shape, so that's the only thing. But otherwise, in terms of the look up and look left rule, they're still there. They're still there. So fundamentally, it's very similar in principle, but it's just the formation of the stitches varies slightly. So next, I have multiple choices, and that's the beauty of this method. And Natty, how kind of you. Natty said, don't forget Yogi alike doing this demo for us. That's very kind. Karen says, how does this work? Let me just highlight this question. So if you have a question, you can always put the question mark so I know it's addressed to me. Okay. So Karen says, how does this work when you have confetti heavy area where there's a long distance between colors? So this is your the choices you make. Very good question. So when it comes to confetti, this is actually a very good method because it keeps everything nice and neat. So you might be aware that some people choose to stitch row by row. Sometimes I do that when it comes to confetti area, because when it comes to confetti, if you start to stitch single stitches here and there, it gets very annoying. But also if you create a lot of boxed in stitches and there's a lot of color changes, the stitches start to get uneven and you build up a lot of bulk underneath because you are not stitching in order. You're just filling in stitches. So when it comes to heavy confetti, this is really nice method because you're dealing with one stitch at a time, and also you're easing away from the completed area. So you're not creating chaos everywhere. You don't have to look around trying to find, loose stitches here and there. And in terms of the principle, it does not change because it doesn't matter whether you're doing one stitch or 5 stitches that's combined together, like in the first diagonal, the star symbol there, I've got about 5 stitches. It does not matter whether 1 stitch or 10 stitches together. The rules don't change, and in terms of the direction you move don't change. And when there's a long distance between colors, it's up to you. Depends on where your comfort zone is. And this is the same with any parking method. With block by block, yes, you park to the next blocks nearby, but some people might choose to park a couple of blocks away if that's where the next stitch is. Or maybe some people choose to end it. And that's the choice you make. And same with Gemma's method. You can choose to park away, but I would say generally I'm thinking about diagonal position, and how far you want to park is up to you, depending on where your comfort zone is. But I would personally, I probably wouldn't park more than 2 blocks away. Maybe within 2 blocks, I'm happy to park to the side, diagonal, down, as long as it's unstitched. And it would be, because this method, you shouldn't come across any stitches along the way. So you're not, crossing over completed area. And it's very clean and tidy. The stitches are very, very, very neat. And every stitch you make, you've got an open area. So we're not, there's no boxed in stitches. I think it's probably sort of started from the fact that Gemma does not enjoy boxed in stitches, and I share that dislike as well, even though now I'm doing a lot more cross country, which creates a lot of boxed in stitches, but if you want your work really neat and tidy, this is perfect. So the distance is up to you. So there's no sort of right or wrong. Yes, Heather says it's up to individual preference, whether you carry the thread across unstitched area or carry on the stitch area on the back, and it stops the thread. So in this, in theory, with this method, I don't know about color flow. Color flow might be different, but if you stitch the original method like this one, in theory, you should never need to carry your threads under completed stitches, because you can see you're moving to a very clear area at all time. So there's no crossover there, and that's the beauty of this method. Because you probably know by now, I've got this this thing about carrying threads on the stitch area, so I would never take anything over this area. For instance, I don't care what it is, I stop my thread and then I restart somewhere else. So in theory, if you stitch the original method, you should never need to cross your thread over any completed stitches. Okay, makes sense? All right. So we've kind of covered the ground rule, and I just want to make a few more stitches so you can see my decision making here. Okay, so in this case, if you look at my pattern here, okay, within this block I'm trying to complete here. So with Gemma's method, the block, the definition, the borders, they are not really applicable because we're not following the blocks. Blocks are just there. You can use that as a references for your to find the location, but we're not following block in any shape or form. So I can organically just start to extend this line, cross multiple blocks, okay, and keep building it. So I have a couple of options here. I've got 3 stitches here at the bottom. They're the same symbol, okay. That's one option, even though I would not stitch all 3 because the 3rd stitch does not have a stitch above already. With the color flow method, Gemma might choose to do all 3. I don't know. I need to look into the way she stitches with that method a little bit more. But if you're following the original method, the stitches can line up to the stitches above, but it does not stick out. okay? Because this stitch, you look up, there's no completed stitches there, so I need to wait. So if I were to come down and do these 2 stitches, I have to stop when I finish these 2 and part to this one, the next stitch, the 3rd stitch. Okay, so this is where the discipline comes in, and it's good fun. It's a good fun. You can always try it and see if, because I think, you know, majority of people probably want to stitch all 3 because they're there. Okay, so so this is the one I'm talking about. There's 3 at the bottom, right? And but you don't do that. So that's one choice. Or I think I might actually go to the top row and continue there and extend the diagonal line slightly further before I come down again. So these are the individual choices. Okay, so my choice in a moment, I'm gonna go to the symbol. Let's go a small circle here, and I'm gonna do 1 stitch there. Okay, so, and you can let me know where you would park next if you were doing this color. Okay, so I only have 1 stitch here. So there are 2 stitches nearby. One is the first stitch of the next block, and the other one is 3 from top, 3 from the bottom. And that probably already gives you some hint on where I'm going to park, okay? Just by the number of stitches, measuring the distance. Right, you let me know. Chelsea says, I find filling in ninja stitches satisfying, like putting the last pieces of the puzzle. Chelsea, if you enjoy ninja stitches, then first of all, lucky you. Then, you know, ninja stitches might not be an issue. But I think for me, oh my God, it's painful. It's painful. And going back and try to fill in, you know, 1 stitch here, 1 stitch there. And a lot of time with ninja stitches for me is not just the fact that there are only a couple of stitches. It's the fact that you might have the same color, but they're away from each other. So the same color, you might have 1 over here and 1 over there. So if you're someone like me, I will not carry the thread over, which means I have to do individual stitches, end it, and start in another location. Okay, so for me, it's quite tedious. And yeah, Heather says, let's all send Chelsea Summers our projects and have them fill in. I know, very tempting. So I've done this stitch over here. Okay, so I personally decided to come to the top, extend this one over there, do the 1 stitch. The next stitch, parking method, the parking location, I've got either here, 2 stitches away, and the second option is 3 stitches away. So as I said, it gives you some hint. I want to pick the nearest location. So I am going to park 2 stitches away instead of 3. Okay, so this will be my next location. Again, this is not black and white. They're good, better practices. I think it makes sense. They're better options. Or maybe I'll put it in the more optimal locations rather than right or wrong. There's no wrong location unless you kind of just breaking the method. So my next, my part thread location is over there. Okay. And once I've done that, I'm going to come back here and start to work on row 2. So now I'm starting to try to, you know, build this diagonal line this way down again. So it makes sense because I've got 2 part threads there. So if you're working within block by block parking method, a lot of times we work the threads from bottom up, right? If you come to a new block, you lift the thread to the opposite direction and start working this way. With Gemma's method, you always work in order of this direction. All right, so I would not work on this thread first, even though it's on an outer edge. A lot of times it's probably easier to work with because, you know, you don't have to cross over to other part threads. But Gemma's method, you pick this one. All right, second row, upper left, and this is where I am. And also another thing I need to mention, okay, if you don't like threading needles, you probably won't enjoy this method as much as I am, because there's a lot of threading and unthreading. As you can see, I'm literally making a single stitch and I'm about to part again. All right, so this one I'm going to part just one stitch away over there. So I want to pick the position that's upper right whenever possible. I can go the other direction, but personally I choose to part one stitch away to the right. And then I am actually going to do this one as well, because I can. There's one stitch above, one stitch to the left, so I can make this stitch. So there's a lot of threading and unthreading, and it has to be something that you enjoy to a certain extent. It doesn't mean you just love threading needles, but you know, you kind of accept that as part of your stitching experience. Okay, so this one is interesting. So this is a symbol I've got here. If you look at my chart here, so how many stitches am I allowed to make with this color? Just asking the chat. Okay, if you look at my chart here, all right, do I have one stitch or two stitches? It's probably too obvious. Okay, so let me thread the needle so you can see there's a lot of threading and unthreading. And I know, you know, if you have watched Gemma stitching, she's got this thing called hot needles, meaning, so what she does, I don't know how she does it. I tried it. It didn't work for me. Okay, so she will have loads of working threads within the same area that she needs to have access to. And what she does, so personally, what I do is, even just for one stitch, I would make that stitch and then unthread it and switch to another thread. But what Gemma does is, sometimes she wouldn't leave the needle threaded like this. She calls hot needles, I think. And she will leave it, literally, and then have a needle minder at the bottom of her sort of slightly lower position. It doesn't get in the way. And she would dock her needle like that until she needs it again. And normally we're not talking about, you know, an hour away. She will only do this, I think, if she needs to switch, let's say very confetti area, okay, and you know there will be about 3 or 4 colors kind of alternating around this area, and maybe you don't want to thread and unthread all the time. She will leave multiple needles like this and dot them at the bottom of her work somewhere there, and then she would just pick up the needle that she needs and just switch around. So she essentially reducing the need to thread and unthread. I tried it. I couldn't do it because I just get everything tangled. Okay, so now I'm going to make this stitch on the second row here, but I also have another stitch on the top row in the diagonal position there. So I'm allowed to make this stitch because it's on the top row, so it doesn't matter if there isn't anything on above. If you think about it as a new start, right? And then I get to extend that top border further here. And if you look at my pattern here, let me mark these 2 stitches I've just made, okay? And then the next logical stitch that's closest to me will be on the second row to the far right there. You see what I'm doing here? So gradually you can see this diagonal is not perfect. That's not what we're trying to do. But it's about constantly looking at this line and go, well, where can I go next in order to smooth out this line a little bit more? Okay, so if I'm looking at where I am right now, yes, it's generally diagonal direction. But this bit is creating a, is making it less diagonal. So this might be my next stitch to go. And in fact, that's where I will go. Suzanne says, I do that sometimes, but I find that if I wax the end of my thread, it makes them easier to thread and unthread. Oh, Suvi, hello. Yes. Yes. I don't wax my threads, but I think it might help. Absolutely. So I'm going to part there. So I'm going to just do the next colors. I think you get an idea, okay? And I'm going to come to the chat and see if you have any questions, if there are things I have not clarified. So I'm look to this color, corner there, because if I think about diagonal line, this one is creating a little bit of a kind of odd shape there. So I'm going to go to that stitch and pick that color, okay? And this one is perfect because if you look at my chart there, it's got one stitch here and it's got one stitch there. Perfect. Okay. Let me have a look. And the parking location of this color would be interesting. So I want you to look at my chart there. So I'm going to do these 2 stitches, the obvious ones, and you tell me where you will park next. Okay, there. I'm going to bring this chart there so you can see 355, 355, 355. So if I define location 1, option 1 would be the first stitch on the bottom on the next block. The second option would be 2 stitches away from here, like that. So it's 1 or 2. Where would you park? Right, so let me do these 2 stitches here. So Lizzie says 2. 2 will be 2 stitches away from there. Let me do this one. So it's, you can see I'm smoothing out that diagonal line just by making these 2 stitches. And it's an ongoing effort to smooth out this line. Okay, so option 1 is here on the bottom here. And option 2 will be 2 stitches away from here. Right. So once again, there's no black and white. You can probably do either, but I'll pick option 1 in the bottom, the first stitch from the bottom block, simply because it's closer to my completed area, because there's only 1 stitch away. Frida says 2 as well. Whereas if you park here, 2 stitches away, so I'm thinking about which location will I get to first. That's what's in my mind, and that probably shapes my decision there, because this stitch, they're technically 2 rows away. Can you see that? So you need to think diagonally. So I might get to this stitch a little bit later, Whereas this one, literally, there's only one stitch away. And if I do the bottom row, I can technically start stitching this one and take it over to the second location. Make sense? So again, this is not a black and white thing. You can probably do either. But if you're thinking along the lines of diagonal shape, then I would pick this one. I would park it here because there's only one stitch away before I can get to this stitch. So I am going to mark these two and park that one. Makes sense? Right, so I'm going to look to the chat and you let me know if you have sort of questions or things I haven't got it. And I also want to talk a little bit about, as you come up with a question, if you have any, I want to just explain a little bit about the diagonal line and also working area as well. Because it probably doesn't matter what diagonal method you go for. You can go for the block by block, or in this case, Gemma's method, or maybe you do very neat, diagonal strips. People go row by row or one, 10 stitches high at a time. Doesn't matter. When it comes to diagonal line, as you can see, as I build up this line, it will start to extend. That line is going to get longer and longer as I go forward. So the question will be, how far do you go before the diagonal line becomes too long? That's really hard to manage because in this case, just like block by block parking, so this, what I'm talking about here also is applicable to block by block parking as well. The same question that you may have for both methods is that, as you can see, there are parked threads extended out this diagonal line there. So currently it's not too bad. We've got about, less than 10 parked thread. But you can imagine as you build up this line there, you can end up with parked threads everywhere along that line. So the question will be, how far do you extend it before you come to have a hard stop? So a lot of times people use, I think Gemma as well, Gemma uses the page height as the border. So she will literally build that diagonal line, keep building, and then use the page border. She doesn't come to the hard stop to the right. She will keep going to the right and create the full strip. I think that's the general order that she stitches. She will build up the horizontal strip, but she will have a hard stop at the bottom. So that diagonal line doesn't just keep building and gets longer and longer and becomes unmanageable. So, and also depending on how big your project is, right? If you're stitching sort of regular heaven and earth pieces, we're talking, pretty large area. So it wouldn't be practical for you just keep building that border there. So it's user defined height. Maybe your comfort zone will be 3 blocks. Maybe your comfort zone is 2 pages or maybe 1 page. I think 1 page is quite workable for most people, even though it's an arbitrary definition. But you can just pick a height that makes sense to you and have a hard stop there. Okay, so there are a couple of things you could do that. One would be, I think what Gemma does, I'm trying to recall, the 2 options you have if you're using the page border, let's say, to create a hard stop for your diagonal line, you can keep parking downwards. So that's one option. So let's say if this is where I'm going to stop my diagonal line and create a strip to the right, flowing to the right, I can continue to park, but these park threads won't be needed for a little while. So I'm going to end up with a lot of park threads below, wherever it's nearest, and keep them there until I get to the next row. Makes sense? Until I finish the first row strip on top, and then come to the next row, and I can pick up the pass threads and use them. So it requires a little bit of thread management if you're going for that. Some people use the bobbin or different methods, okay? And or you can choose to end all the pass threads. When it gets to the bottom border, you just end the thread. So you have a clean stop here. So that's quite a nice way of doing it, even though when you get to the second row, you will need to plant all the pass threads from the start. So literally it's a new start, just like this, and then you start planting threads. So it's a personal choice, so in a way, you don't just end up with sort of really unmanageable lengths that you have to deal with. So it's a personal decision. And yeah, so hopefully that answers your question, because I remember that was raised for the diagonal block by block, and literally you apply the same, the same options applied to the block by block parking methods as well. You can just pick a hard stop, and you can park down, or you just end everything and have a clean start when you come to the second row. So I'm going to look to the chat and see if anybody's got questions. I think I probably covered, the key principles here, because when it comes to a moment by moment decisions, it simply, is up to the stitches to a great extent. So I'm going to just bring up the slide here and give you a reminder. The only rules, hard rules, I say, would be the first thing we mentioned when it comes to making a stitch of any location. You need to look up, look above, and look to the left, okay? And look to the left. These are, I would say, harder rules. You do not stitch the blue square unless B and C are there. Okay, that's it. And other than that, when it comes to moment decisions, it's very nuanced, as you can see. And you can, flow from bottom up or top to bottom, and you can create irregular shapes as well. Sometimes, if you follow the pattern, sometimes you create really odd shapes. That's generally diagonal, but not really as neat as this. But it's part of the fun that you can't constantly come back to the line and see where can I fill in a little bit more to make it smoother. Okay, and Frida says this is excellent. Thank you for doing this. I hope so, because this is one of the methods I really love, and I used to do a lot more. Recent projects, I do a lot more sort of cross country, so I'm sort of trying to experiment with new methods. But this was one of my go-to methods when I started doing full coverage. And it's very orderly and it's great fun. And I would highly suggest that you go and watch Gemma's channel, and I've included her playlist for tutorial in the description here as well, so you can have a quick access there. I think the best way is to watch someone making moment by moment decisions here. That will give you the best insight. And the fun thing is, just like I did when I was watching Gemma's methods and trying to figure out the method, I was watching it's a chess sort of chess game. I was trying to predict, and if I get the right one, the right correct option that she did, I got really happy. And as you do so, it was become to make sense. Okay, and I hope that helps, guys. And let me look at the time. So currently is about 6:30 in the UK, and of course we have the sun coming up. So let's have a look. 6:30. How about if we start in a slightly earlier time, let's say if we start the saw as we're here, right, and we're ready to stitch, and we can start Amy saw in about an hour's time. How's that? So that would be around 7:30, 7:40-ish UK time, and we can have a little break, and make something, grab some snacks, and we'll come back for the Amy saw. How's that? Thumbs up, everyone. Give me a thumbs up. Okay. So I am going to end this demo. Okay. And if there's no questions, then I will set up the schedule for the next hour in the next 5 to 10 minutes or so. And so you know when exactly it starts. I'm thinking about an hour's time. Grace Harston, say thank you. And Raja has just joined us as well. So welcome. And I'll say hello to you properly when we get to the Amy saw. Okay, I'm excited. Okay, all right then. Guys, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope this helps, and just, give it a little bit of practice. It's really fun way of stitching, I promise you. So I'll see you at the Amy saw, okay? And we'll relax and chat. Oh, no more PowerPoint slides for the Amy saw. Okay, I'll see you in a bit. I'll see you in about an hour's time. All right, until then.